All right, folks. This video is going to focus on the drum set. So, the most common use of the drum set in the band and orchestra program is going to be for your jazz band if you happen to have one. But there is also some orchestral and band literature, particularly pops literature, that is going to call for the drum set. So it's important that we at least spend a couple minutes talking about what the drum set is and how it works, right? So very, very quick history of the drum set. The drum set emerges in the beginning of the 20th century in New Orleans out of the development of New Orleans jazz, as we have second-line marching bands in New Orleans that finish their marching but want to continue playing. They get to their stopping point, everybody puts their equipment down, and with a couple of technological innovations such as the pedals and such, players figure out how to play the bass drum, the cymbal, and the snare drum parts that would be played by multiple players while marching. Somebody figured out how, or multiple players figured out how to play all those things at the same time. So your standard configuration for the drum set, and again there are a lot of variations for this, but your standard configuration is what's going to be called a four-piece kit. So that means that there are four drums. So you'll have your snare drum, usually a rack-mounted tom, a lower tom called a floor tom because it sits on legs on the floor, and then your bass drum that you'll play with a pedal. Right, and I'll bring the camera over and I'll show you the pedal in a second. Right, so snare, two toms, and bass. That creates a four-piece kit. That's a very standard configuration for jazz. For rock, a five-piece kit with another tom here in the spot where the ride cymbal is would be very common. And then, of course, if you want to, get into anything else advanced like that, you can explode the kit out in a limitless number of ways by adding more cymbals, adding effects, adding electronics, adding all sorts of stuff like that. Cymbals, the most common cymbal is the hi-hat cymbal, which is a pair of cymbals here that I open and close with my feet with this pedal here. So I can open and close the cymbals there, or I can play it with a stick, or I can do both. Our standard time-keeping cymbal is going to be the ride cymbal, which is over here on my right. It's called the ride cymbal because that's the cymbal where the rhythm rides. This is a term that comes to us from jazz. Ride cymbal will look very similar to any suspended concert cymbals we have, like we talked about in one of the other videos. However, ride cymbals tend to be thicker and therefore higher pitched and are not good substitutes in your concert band. If you have a suspended cymbal part and you only have a ride cymbal, it's not going to be a good sounding cymbal for that. So again, they tend to be thicker than suspended cymbals, so they'll have a much brighter, pingier sound. And again, you can play on the bell too. And then our standard accent cymbal is the crash cymbal. Again, come in a huge variety of different configurations and sizes. Then you can add chinas and splashes and all sorts of other stuff. So, the drum set is really an instrument of massive coordination. Your brain computer has to control four different things, both feet and both hands, when you're playing. In another video, I'll give you a couple of... I'll put the camera right in front of me and we'll do a couple short exercises that you can do on your lap, just patting your hands and feet. To get a feel of how some of these drum set rhythms work. So, the standard configuration is going to put your hi-hat on your left and your ride cymbal on your right, but you're typically going to play your timing with the same hand. So if you're a right-handed player, usually you're going to play either your timing over here on the ride cymbal, or you're going to move your right hand over and play your timing on the hi-hat, right? So, turn the snare back on here, and I'll just play a really quick, simple rock groove. like that, right? So all your timing, whatever you're playing straight eighth notes in rock, or if you're playing a shuffle, like more or less, or like I was playing, if you're playing spang, spang-a-lang, like you play with jazz, then your timing will be with the same hand, right? Timing will be with the same hand either on the hi-hat or the ride cymbal. There are lots of players now who are starting to take the hi-hat and put it over on the ride cymbal side so that all their timing is all right in a smaller space. And there are also players, especially left-handed players, who play what's called open-handed. So instead of the hands crossing over each other like this, hi-hat with your right hand, snare drum with your left hand, they're playing what's called open-handed, where they'll play their timing on this side of the drum kit with your left hand, then your snare and your toms and stuff with your right hand, right? So any of those is okay. Don't be dogmatic about the system, right? Educate the player. So a couple of basic things, and again, I'll bring the video over here so you can see. Here's a shot of the bass drum pedal, right? And your book talks about there being two techniques for this: either heel down, which is a softer sound, very useful in jazz, or you can play heel up, where you play with your whole foot, much harder sound, very common in rock. Right, so you get a lot more sound out of that. I'll just take you through a couple quick grooves again, and I'll put some basic exercises together that you guys can practice on your own. Right, so we'll just do a basic rock groove now. So we're gonna play straight eighth notes on the hi-hat, and then a low sound on the bass drum, high sound on the snare drum. Then a quick jazz thing here. Also common in jazz is switching to traditional grip, which we haven't really talked about this semester. In the left hand, it gives you, at least on Drumset, it gives you a quieter, more subtle sound than playing match grip. So the stick is held in the hand this way. This comes from old marching tradition where the drum would have been slung across your side, so you can't very well play like this. So you turn your hand around. You can play like this. So this is still a very common grip. You don't have to teach it, but if you can, then your players can use it. But it's very common, especially for jazz. Notice here with my basic jazz time that I'm playing 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. Alright, so that's a real quick, just physical introduction to the drum set. I'll put some more exercises together, just some hands and feet stuff for you guys that you can do, tapping your feet and playing on your legs. Alright, another video later.